The office was a typical downtown building, the kind where everyone seemed to be in a constant rush, typing away on keyboards, answering phone calls, and scrambling to meet tight deadlines. It was the heart of the city's business district, and the air was always thick with the hum of activity. People passed by in suits, glancing at their watches, too absorbed in their own work to pay much attention to anyone else. The pressure was palpable, but that was the nature of the job. Everyone had their own battles to fight. Among them was Sarah, a young woman in her late 20s, visibly pregnant, her once vibrant energy now replaced by exhaustion. She had been working at the company for a couple of years, and despite the weight of her growing belly and the physical toll it was taking on her body, she continued to push herself. Every morning, she arrived early and left late, her determination shining through the fatigue in her eyes. Sarah didn't want to let her colleagues or boss down, but inside, she was struggling. The endless meetings, the never-ending stack of papers, the demands of the job, it was all starting to take its toll. Her back ached, her feet swelled with each passing hour, but she smiled through it all, hoping no one would notice how badly she was hurting. In the midst of it all, no one seemed to notice. The office buzzed with noise and movement, but Sarah's quiet pain went unnoticed, lost in the rhythm of the workplace. Sarah's day began as it always did, early, with a cup of coffee in hand and a never-ending list of tasks ahead. The first meeting of the morning was already in full swing when she walked in, her swollen feet aching with every step. She smiled politely, sitting down as her colleagues discussed the upcoming project. Her back throbbed as she shifted in her chair, trying to find a comfortable position, but there was no relief. It felt like the weight of the world rested on her shoulders, and the little life growing inside her only added to the burden. After the meeting, Sarah returned to her desk, sorting through piles of paperwork. She was used to the routine, the calls, the emails, the never-ending deadlines, but today, everything felt heavier. Her body was exhausted, the constant fatigue making it hard to focus on the simplest tasks. Her legs were sore from standing too long, and her feet felt as though they were being crushed inside her shoes. Yet she pushed through, typing away and meeting each deadline as if it were any other day. But then came the moment that tested her limits. Her boss, with his usual urgency, handed her a file stacked with new assignments, asking her to complete everything by the end of the day. It wasn't that she couldn't handle the work. It was that today, it felt like too much. As she stood up to take the file from him, the weight of her growing belly threw her off balance, and her back screamed in protest. She gritted her teeth, masking the discomfort with a smile. "I'll get right on it," she said, her voice strained but steady. Inside, frustration bubbled up. She wanted to scream, to ask for help, but the words wouldn't come. She was afraid of being seen as weak, of being judged for her inability to keep up. Her coworkers glanced at her now and then, noticing her struggle, but no one said a word. Everyone was too caught up in their own tasks, too consumed by their own deadlines to offer assistance. Sarah felt isolated, as if she were invisible in a room full of people. She pressed on, hoping that somehow she could just keep going. Johnny Depp's visit to the office was nothing like the spectacle one might expect for a Hollywood star. He wasn't escorted by an entourage or surrounded by cameras. In fact, his arrival was almost unremarkable, as he quietly stepped into the building with a few colleagues, blending in with the everyday crowd. Johnny wasn't there for a press event or a fan meet and greet. He had come for a simple business meeting, a project that required him to consult with a few key people. No one had anticipated his arrival, and his presence seemed almost ordinary, as though he were just another professional doing his job. At first, Sarah didn't even realize Johnny was there. She was too absorbed in her work, trying to keep up with the mountain of tasks her boss had piled on her. She sat at her desk, clicking through emails, her focus entirely on the screen in front of her. It was only when she stood up to stretch her aching back that Johnny caught a glimpse of her. He hadn't intended to watch, but as he passed by her desk on his way to the meeting, something caught his eye. He noticed the way Sarah's hand hovered over her swollen belly when she stood, as though the simple act of rising from her chair took more effort than it should. He saw the way she grimaced slightly as she bent to pick up a file, her movements slow and deliberate, trying to hide the strain in her face. His heart tightened when she winced as she sat back down, taking a deep breath to brace herself. Johnny stood there for a moment, silently observing her, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He could see the exhaustion in her posture, the quiet struggle that she was trying so desperately to keep hidden. Johnny understood that kind of burden all too well. He had walked through his own dark times, times when the pressure seemed too much to bear, and the weight of expectations felt crushing. He knew what it was like to feel drained, physically and emotionally, with no one to turn to. It was in that brief moment, as he watched Sarah fight her inner battle, that Johnny decided he would do something about it. The moment of Sarah's struggle was undeniable. She had just finished another round of paperwork, her hands trembling slightly as she shuffled through the stack of files. She stood up, a little too quickly, her legs stiff and sore from sitting for hours. As she reached for a folder on the top shelf, her body gave way. She stumbled, her feet slipping beneath her, and for a brief moment, she felt like the entire office was closing in on her. The folder she was holding slipped from her grasp, falling to the floor with a loud thud, scattering papers everywhere. Sarah froze, a deep flush rising to her cheeks. Her heart raced, and she looked around the office, hoping no one had noticed her moment of weakness. But it was too late. Johnny, who had been watching from the sidelines, saw the whole thing. He didn't hesitate. With calm, purposeful steps, he walked over to her desk, his presence so steady and unassuming that Sarah barely noticed until he was standing right beside her. "Here, let me help," Johnny said, his voice low but kind, extending his hand to pick up the fallen papers. Sarah felt a wave of embarrassment wash over her. She was used to managing on her own, never asking for help, especially from someone she barely knew. She smiled weakly, shaking her head. "It's okay, really," she replied, her voice betraying the fatigue that had built up inside her. "I've got it." But Johnny's gaze was warm and patient. "It's okay to ask for help," he said gently. "No one expects you to do it all alone." Something in his voice made her pause. There was no judgment in his words, only understanding. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt like someone saw her, truly saw her struggle. Her hesitation faded, and with a mix of relief and guilt, she finally allowed him to help. Johnny bent down, picking up the papers and stacking them neatly. It seemed like such a small thing to him, but to Sarah, it meant the world. She watched him for a moment, a knot in her throat as the weight of the day finally began to lift, even if just a little. The moment Johnny helped Sarah, something shifted in the office. The brief exchange, which seemed so small to him, sent ripples through the bustling workplace. Sarah, who had been silently struggling for days, now found herself the center of attention. Her coworkers, who had walked past her with barely a second glance, now paused in their tracks, observing the scene with a mix of surprise and admiration. No one had ever stepped in to help Sarah before, and certainly not someone like Johnny Depp. His gesture wasn't grandiose, nor did it demand attention, but it was something none of them had expected. Sarah had been quietly battling her exhaustion, while others around her remained focused on their own tasks, too preoccupied to notice. But Johnny's kindness, his willingness to help without a second thought, left a powerful impression. It was a reminder of how little acts of compassion could make a world of difference. The office buzzed with whispers almost immediately. Some coworkers were in awe, remarking on Johnny's unexpected kindness, while others were skeptical, questioning why he'd chosen to help Sarah, of all people. The rumor mill began to churn, stories about Johnny's compassionate side starting to circulate like wildfire. They spoke of his past struggles, how he had faced personal demons, the pressures of fame, and the way he had always been misunderstood by the public. The more they talked, the more his actions seemed to make sense. Johnny had endured his own hardships, and maybe that's why he saw something in Sarah's struggle. Sarah, however, felt a mix of emotions. Embarrassment flooded her as the attention shifted toward her. She didn't want to be the subject of office gossip, nor did she want people to pity her. But at the same time, she was deeply grateful. She had never expected someone like Johnny, a man so far removed from her world, to even notice her, let alone offer help. It felt like a breath of fresh air in an otherwise suffocating environment. Throughout the rest of the day, Johnny continued to check in on her. He didn't make a big deal of it, but every now and then he'd stop by her desk, offering a warm smile and a few kind words. It wasn't charity, it was genuine concern. He made sure she was okay without making her feel weak or incapable. And that, in itself, was something Sarah hadn't experienced in a long time. Someone seeing her not as a burden, but as a person worthy of care and respect. Over the next few days, Sarah noticed a subtle but profound shift in herself. Johnny's simple act of kindness had ignited something within her. Something she hadn't realized she had lost over time. She began to feel a quiet strength that she hadn't felt before. The kind that comes not from pushing through every obstacle alone, but from acknowledging that it was okay to lean on others. For the first time in months, she felt seen, valued, not just as an employee, but as a person. Johnny's gesture had opened her eyes to her own worth, reminding her that her struggles didn't make her weak, but rather, they made her human. As the days passed, Sarah noticed a shift in the way her coworkers interacted with her. At first it was small, an offer to carry her coffee, a helping hand with a file, a simple acknowledgement of how much effort she was putting in. They had seen Johnny's kindness, and somehow, it made them reevaluate their own actions. They started to treat her with more empathy, as though her burden was now something they could share, not just something for her to bear alone. It wasn't just about the help, it was the understanding, the recognition that everyone, no matter how capable, has their limits. The office environment slowly began to change too. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, but there was a noticeable difference. People were a little kinder, a little more aware of each other's needs. The air felt less heavy, less rushed. Sarah wasn't the only one benefiting from this newfound compassion. Others seemed to be feeling it too. The workplace was still busy, still demanding, but there was now an undercurrent of support, a shared understanding that everyone was facing their own challenges. Sarah reflected on how life could be tough, how sometimes it felt like the weight of it all was unbearable. But Johnny's small act of kindness had shown her something powerful, that just one person's genuine action could change everything. It didn't need to be grand or loud. In that one moment, Johnny had left an everlasting mark on Sarah's life, teaching her that compassion, no matter how small, had the power to heal, to uplift, and to change the course of her day, and maybe even her life. As Sarah settled into her new rhythm at work, she couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the small but significant changes that had taken place. Her coworkers were more supportive, the office environment felt lighter, and she was learning to accept help when she needed it. Johnny's kindness continued to resonate with her, and she found herself looking forward to his occasional visits, where he would check in on her, offering words of encouragement and a warm smile. One afternoon, after a meeting, Sarah found herself in the break room alone, sipping her coffee and reflecting on the changes she had experienced. It was then that Johnny walked in. He wasn't in a hurry, as he often was, and this time, he seemed to be in no rush to leave. He smiled at Sarah as he grabbed a cup of coffee for himself and casually walked over to her table. They exchanged pleasantries before the conversation drifted into more personal territory. "How have you been?" Johnny asked, his voice soft but genuine, his eyes full of curiosity and concern. Sarah smiled, appreciating his continued interest. "Better, actually. It's been a lot easier to get through the day now. People have been really kind." She paused, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I don't know what you saw in me that day, but it really helped." Johnny's eyes softened, and he set his coffee down before sitting across from her. For a moment, he was quiet, as though weighing something in his mind. Then, unexpectedly, he spoke. "You know, I've been there," he said quietly, looking down at his cup. "I know what it's like to feel like you can't ask for help, to feel like you're too broken to admit you need it." Sarah was taken aback by his words, her brow furrowing in surprise. Johnny continued, his voice low and steady. "There was a time in my life when everything fell apart," he said. "I lost my way for a while. My family, they struggled, and I felt like I couldn't turn to anyone. I kept everything inside, pretending I was fine, but eventually I realized that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to ask for help." Sarah sat in stunned silence, her heart aching for him. Johnny, the man who seemed so put together, had faced his own battles. His kindness to her now made so much more sense. He wasn't just being compassionate out of the blue. He was offering what he knew all too well: understanding. He had been in the same place, feeling invisible, and he understood the weight of keeping it all to himself. Her admiration for him deepened as she realized that Johnny's kindness wasn't a mere act of charity. It was a reflection of his own vulnerability, his own scars. And in that moment, Sarah knew that true empathy came from understanding the pain of others, from having lived it yourself. As the days went on, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on everything she had learned. Johnny's unexpected kindness had left an indelible mark on her heart. It had been a reminder that sometimes the most profound changes come from the simplest acts of compassion. Johnny's words and actions had shown her that it was okay to lean on others, to ask for help when needed, and to not let her struggles define her. Sarah's attitude toward her pregnancy and her job began to shift. She started to prioritize her well-being more, no longer ignoring the physical signs of exhaustion, and she was unafraid to speak up when she needed support. Her coworkers, who had once been too caught up in their own worlds, now offered help without hesitation. The office environment had become a little warmer, a little more understanding. Johnny's actions had ignited something in them, a realization that a simple act of kindness could change someone's day or even their life. The ripple effect was clear. Kindness, however small, had the power to transform. Sarah now approached her work with a renewed sense of self-worth. She felt stronger, more confident, and more in tune with her own needs. The kindness she had received from Johnny had taught her that she was more than just an employee or a pregnant woman trying to push through. She was a person worthy of care, support, and respect. As she continued her work, Sarah did so with a heart full of gratitude, knowing that sometimes the most unexpected people, like Johnny, could make the biggest difference in someone's life. Thank you so much for watching Sarah's journey of strength, kindness, and self-discovery. Johnny Depp's unexpected act of compassion reminds us all that a little kindness can go a long way, changing lives in ways we may never expect. It's a powerful reminder to always look out for those around us, because sometimes the smallest gestures can make the biggest impact. If you enjoyed this story and felt inspired by Sarah's experience, please don't forget to like, comment, and share it with others who could use a little kindness in their day. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Has kindness ever made a difference in your life? Let us know in the comments below. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories just like this one. Thank you for being a part of our community, and we'll see you in the next video.